Julian Jones, welcome to the show. So happy to have you.
Yeah, man. Happy to be here, man. It meant a lot that you invited me on, man. I looked at a couple of your episodes, and the last couple of guests were some really smart people, man. I'm not exactly sure why you reached out to me, but I am happy to be here.
Everybody's got their own story to share. And I think it's
Mhm.
funny. I set out to start connecting with investors, business owners, entrepreneurs, that sort of thing. And some of my earlier conversations, they were here's talking about fix and flip, and now we're going to talk about mindset, or here's talking
Mhm.
about transactions, and now we're talking about family values. And it's like, you never know what kind of value someone might have to share.
Sure. Yeah, certainly. I definitely fall under the heading of a business owner. I started a cleaning company in 2000. I guess this would be 2015. The business has increased year over year. My wife and I just started it together. Quite a journey. We've been able to do some really interesting things in terms of just being able to travel. I have the freedom to spend time. I have a grandson now, so I get a lot of opportunities to spend time there. And that's what it's about. It starts out being about the money, and you realize once you can pay your bills, it's so less about the money and more about the freedom and having the options, being able to contribute where you weren't able to before.
How long did it take you to have that realization that the money wasn't gonna bring you that happiness that you were seeking?
Good question. I think the shift would probably happen year 2 or 3. So we started the business. It was basically just to pay for the wedding. I'm like, we could
Mhm.
go into a bunch of debt, or we could just start like a small business, see how it lasts for about 18 months or so. And it did well. I fell into a networking group. The leads started coming in. We called back every single one. And before we know it, the calendar was full. And then you're like 6 months into the marriage. All the credit cards are paid off, and you're starting that next chapter of your life. And you're like, should we just keep this business going? I would say I think we really hit our stride about middle of like year 2 when it was like, all right, this is something special. And then that's when the doors started to open. We were able to do things for our church, do things for our families. We noticed our schedule actually, that's when we actually first started getting relief and the schedule opened up. Because at first you can pay your bills pretty early, but you're going from bell to bell all day. So
Right.
you don't really have the freedom yet. Middle year 2, maybe year 3.
When did you realize that you had a unique opportunity for that business?
Believe it or not, I would actually push back on that. It starts out as a unique opportunity, but I think it's an opportunity that everybody has. But your competitive advantage can literally just be I'm just going to do it nobody else is willing to do. Right now, obviously, a lot of people are willing to start cleaning companies. There's a
Mhm.
bunch of them. Right. But when you're first starting out, you'd be surprised at how few people are willing to call back every single lead, who are willing to work for under market price just to get their foot in the door and start generating those relationships. How many people will travel outside of their service area for a job they might not be making a ton of money on, but you're still learning. So in terms of being special, I would never consider myself more overqualified than anybody else. It becomes a matter of grit and like, what are you really willing to do to take your business to the next level? And then I think we were talking about before, one day you look up 17, 18 months later and you're like, oh, this is like a legit business. You don't feel special when you're doing it. But like I was saying, middle year 2, you're like, oh, what we built together is incredible.
I think you really touched on something pretty important is that in the beginning, going outside of your comfort zones, per se, your range for your cleaning company, you might not service one area, but you're still going to go out
Right.
and do it just to learn. Because
Right.
in the beginning, your customers are the ones that are actually teaching you. And
Correct.
so you want to cut your learning curve down as fast as possible so you can
Mhm.
make it less painful for them.
Correct. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think it's the same across the board, right? Like when you're a musician, obviously you want to do the big gig, but you're playing for beers and maybe like a small drink tab. And when you're landscaping, you're just doing your neighbors for next to nothing. You're doing their lawns. There is a learning curve. And if you're willing to take that step backwards and humble yourself and be like, I don't know what I don't know yet, and I just have to get the reps in, you'll thank yourself, I believe.
It seems like you were pretty headstrong getting into this, but was there a time when you were like, I don't know if this might be the right fit during those first 2 years?
Absolutely. When you're doing your commercial account, you're on 2 days with no sleep and you're just covered in like grease from like a restaurant kitchen. And you're like, what am I doing this for again? You didn't price it out. You're like, I'm definitely doing this for a fraction of what I should be charging for, but I already got my foot in the door, so I can't really go back on my word now. And you're like, do I So I just chalk this up and just go get a 9 to 5, and then you push through. I think one of the frames that I like, and it's not profound at all, it's you can quit, just don't quit now. You know what I mean? Like the same way you have cravings when you're trying to diet and you have a craving. The craving lasts like 20 minutes, or the bad condition lasts is usually pretty temporary. One of the things that got me through is, look, you can quit right now if you just don't. See how you feel when it's done. And then next thing you realize, you're like, oh, it was like in the moment, it wasn't that bad. And then when you get on the other end of it,
I,
but it was
I
something
think that's
simple like that. Yeah.
I think that's really good. I've heard it a couple different ways.
Yeah.
For instance, I don't know if you've read The Compound Effect. I believe it's
No.
by Darren Hardy.
Okay.
Um, and one of the things they talk about is obviously your results are constantly compounding. And so the work that you're putting in is constantly building towards this growth period. You might not be able to see it, but if you put a penny in every day, eventually you're going to have $100. And so it's if you're going to quit, the best time to quit is before you start, because
Right.
once you started, it's already compounding.
Mm.
Um, and I heard a gentleman named Julian. He said it another way. He has this program that he runs out in California, and it's all about finding yourself and really breaking down some mental barriers that you have. What he tells people that are going through it is they're doing these grueling challenges, truck pulls, long ruck marches, getting little sleep sometimes, and someone is looking at that bell to quit, and he's like, how about this? You just finish this exercise, whatever we're doing here, and then if you still want to quit, you can go quit, but just finish this one thing, right?
Mm.
And they go finish it, and then they start the next one, and then he comes right back and he's like, just finish this one for me, and you can go. And the whole thing is just that the hard times in life, you can think back to plenty of hard times that anybody has had, but they only last for that little bit of time. And when it's
Sure.
over, you're usually like, that wasn't, it might have sucked, but you're like, that wasn't terrible. And so I think there's definitely something to learn from that.
Yeah. I was going to ask you in the same regard. I noticed that, did I see that correctly? That you run races, marathons, half marathons, or something?
I did one marathon.
So when you feel your, whether it's calluses on your feet, whether it's your chest getting heavy, what do you tell yourself in those times?
I did a trail marathon, and
Okay.
so when I had scheduled that, I really didn't look into any of the details, which is probably not a great idea. And so I had been used to running on flat ground and everything, and then I get there and it's trails. So right off the bat, I was like, how I was feeling great. Like I was running on the streets, everything was perfectly fine, my times were good, and then I hit the trail and I was like, what was all that training for?
Yeah.
And I definitely think that part of me getting out there and doing hard stuff like that is I'm already out here. At this point, you might as well just keep going, especially on a trail. If you're in the middle of a trail, it's like you can stop now, but you can
Right.
sit here. You got to go forward or you got to go back. Either way, you're going to be walking. So just go forward.
Yeah. Like that was, I think Goggins used a similar frame. Like he would run into SEALs that had quit at like certain events. And he was like, and they're always like, the biggest thing I ever did was regret not finishing the training, because it's like I got to where I'm at because I quit. And then the guys that made it, like, I got to where I'm at because it was my destiny. And I pushed myself to the limit. And I know for a fact I'm where I'm supposed to be. And you
Mhm.
never really have that comfort if you quit. You're like, oh, I just stopped.
It's like that nagging in the back of your mind that, ooh, did I
Mhm.
really empty the tank here? Did I really give it my all? And if you didn't, and you just have to live with that. So I feel like it's better to give it your all and just go all in
Mhm.
than half-assing it and not
Sure.
putting your best foot forward.
I actually, it's the same thing. I'm from two different worlds, so to speak. Whereas I was trying to do the music thing all through my 20s. It is more of an artistic endeavor. So you're not really applying these like business principles, really. You're just out there with some songs and some venues. You're just trying to stumble your way through it. But I think about it now where I was like, if I had dedicated that same will and effort to like trying to do music as I did in my business, I don't know if I would have been a star, but I would have went way further. I look at some of the decisions I made to quit, how I chose to invest time, where my priorities were, and I'm like, oh, I definitely left a lot of meat on the bone when I look back at who I was in my 20s versus who I am in my like late 30s when I started a business. And it's weird too because now I still have like connections in music, and I try to give the same principles, and people just look at me sideways. Dude, I just want to play guitar, man. And I'm like, no, but look, you got to do this though. You got to not quit. You got to do the hard work, and you got to put in the time. And they're like, no, man, I just want to rock out. I'm like, no, but you're gonna fail. No, you gotta do all the other stuff.
It's the passion behind it and the
Yeah.
drive. It gets really exciting. For instance, someone came to my W-2 the other day
Mhm.
and they were talking about that they were tired of where they were at and they were looking at other jobs. And I was just so ecstatic for them. I wanted to talk to this man for hours, but I
Yeah.
knew he had a job to get back to.
Right.
And it's just seeing someone get on that path of entrepreneurship and just wanting more for themselves and just
Right.
developing that growth mindset is really exciting.
Yeah. That is really cool. Now you gave me some good titles just now. I'd be curious, man, in terms of who's influencing you and informing your decisions. What are you reading now, or do you have anything on your shelf that jumps out at you?
Currently, I'm reading Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. It's by Joe Dispenza. It's a book about meditation techniques, but teaching, what's a good way to put it? It's really finding the person that you are inside and not the one that you are showing to the world. So there's this gap between who you are and who you show. And it's figuring out how to close that gap and just be yourself.
Mm, okay. Now, did you grab that because of like your business venture, or was this more for like enjoyment?
I strongly believe that the amount that you're able to make will never outgrow your personal growth.
Makes sense.
And so if you just focus on making the money, sure, you can get there through hard work and determination. But at a certain point, you have to stop and actually focus on growing yourself as a person if you want to get to that next level.
It took me a lot of time to shift the focus from earning to just improving in general, because I didn't really see the connection organically. It was like, if I don't want to be like a better person and be poor, shouldn't I be out here trying to make the most money, learn the best pitches, the best closes, get the most leads, get more leads than everybody, because that means I'll have more turns at the plate and I'll be able to earn more. And being able to shift that frame to know your character is going to have a direct result of your income. Your ability to grow is going to affect the way that you move more fluidly through different circles. And which will and in those circles there'll be these little pockets of revenue. But if you stay focused solely on the revenue, you're never going to be ingratiated in those circles. So you also have to bring value, and that value can come by the way of just being like an incredible person, being warm, being integral, being somebody who keeps their word. So it was like this indirect way of being like, okay, this is the kind of person that attracts money. One of the things they do is don't focus on money, focus
Right.
on growth and contribution. So it was a complicated frame. And let me tell you, I am only recently still figuring some of this stuff out. I don't have this like quarter century breadth of experience. I'm still this like current work in progress. And you think you got it figured out. And then you open a book like the one you just said, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess I still have some more figuring to do.
Yeah, I think life will always be it'll always be a lifelong learning process, whatever you do. If you're not growing, you're dying.
Yes. Yeah.
Was there a mentor, any books that you're reading that kind of helped you develop that mindset?
There's the hits. I came up on Kiyosaki, Robert Greene. I mean, this is the stuff that everybody knows. But Stephen Pressfield was actually my go-to, believe it or not. I read War of Art and Turning Pro, and it was like, I was like, oh, that's what it means. Turning Pro is probably the book that I picked up. And it's like, oh, look, if you're gonna be serious, like this is what it takes to be looked at and taken serious by people in the circles you want to be in. So I think he's like in a class by himself, and everything else is good. But Stephen Pressfield's like the one for me.
What do you think was the biggest eye opener for you? How to present yourself in those circles?
It was the thing was embracing the things that make you. I think that it's really easy, especially if you're a younger guy, to get in these podcasts and sit in these like the YouTube channels. Oh, this is what a successful guy looks like. All right, I don't really look like that. All right, sorry, let me get Jack. Okay, now I'm Jack. Okay, how does he talk? I don't really talk like that. So let me like learn how to talk and move. And what Stephen Pressfield said, it's about refining the things that make you so you're still a very clear representation of yourself, but it's accentuating like the best parts of you. Yes, there's work ethic, yes, there's technique, but that's what you're doing. You're refining your instincts and building a confidence in yourself. So as you're moving around, you are, well, one, you're bringing value to those new circles, but you're also growing in a way that's very exclusive to you. More often than not, your competitive advantage will be who you are. I can do a real estate podcast, and you can do a real estate podcast, and there will be a microcosm of listeners that will just gravitate to one of us just because of who we are. We can both have the same information, but they'll just be like, I just like his vibe. And there's a certain health and productivity in leaning into that. Representing truth and facts based in data, but still in a package that's exclusively you.
Yeah, two people can put out the exact same content and get entirely different results just from who they are, because you don't know who you're going to resonate with. You don't know who in your audience is actually going to resonate with you. Even if they are that person that you would like, maybe as a client per se, they might not resonate with you specifically. And so they go to another one. But yes, that's very interesting. Do you ever find yourself dealing with imposter syndrome?
Oh, all the time. In my job, I guess my life didn't really follow the regular adult arc, at least not for this area where I grew up in. People, you went to school, you went to college, you had your kids, you get a little house in Abington, and then you start your job at 24, 25. I took like that 10-year hiatus, like I was saying, to do music. So when I was like, all right, this music thing's not going to happen for me, I'm 10 years behind everybody, right? So I'm going to interviews where I'm like competing with people with 10 years experience. And then I actually get a job and I'm like, oh, now I'm shoulder to shoulder with people who are way better. So I always felt like I was behind. Even when I was starting out the cleaning business, I'm in networking events and I could be sitting next to an estate lawyer worth 7 figures. And I'm like, if anybody ever needs cleaning, here's my card. meanwhile, the guy next to me won't even talk to you unless you're worth like 2.5 M's. So I always felt like I was looking up at my competition.
So you've got the music going on, you've got the cleaning business. How do you decide when to pivot and start a new venture?
Good question. So to be clear, just for anybody that's listening, like music was something I did as a teenager up until probably like my late 20s. Then I just had just regular jobs and then started the cleaning business when I was in my like mid 30s. So there wasn't really like with the music thing, I just quit. Like my heart wasn't in it. Oddly enough, I felt like too old for it, even though there's half the people we listen to are still like, there's plenty of 40-year-old performers that do great. But in terms of deciding when to pivot, I think it's once I don't have the ability to invest emotionally anymore, it's time for me to shift. It sounds kind of cliche, but they say you're supposed to love the work. And the people that really succeed like, really love the work. Like the bands that do really well, they love touring. They love being in the studio. They love sleeping in vans and going from city to city. And then when they're out on tour, they hear their song on the radio and they blow up. That's how the success story goes. You know, it's because they love the work. The people that have great podcasts, it's not because they got an endorsement. It's because they loved recording and they loved connecting with people. And maybe they love the technical aspect of it, or maybe they love the doing like the research, or they just love the subject matter, but they loved it. And then somewhere around episode 640, they got the big Spotify deal, but they loved the work. So episode 1 through 639 didn't feel like a grind. It was hard, but it wasn't hateful. So I think if you can still emotionally invest, if you still feel that like dopamine reward from doing something or putting out good work, you can't stop. And if you don't have the ability to feel that anymore and you're just spinning wheels, you have to stop.
Having that disconnect with music, I feel like you had this project that you were building on, and then you just said your heart wasn't in it. And so how were you able to shift out of that? Because I feel like it might have been a little tough seeing that you took all this time and energy and put it all into this. Was it hard separating yourself and letting go?
Yeah, because deep down, I really love music, but loving music and the music business are two opposite sides of the spectrum. Let me tell you, I could go to a concert 4 or 5 nights a week. Like, I love music, it's in me. But so much of the music business is social media, it's going to venues, it's chasing down venue owners for you to get paid, it's hiring band members if you don't already have a band, there's politics of it. You can play here, but not here. Can you afford to take off work? Because you have to have a 9 to 5 if you're doing music. You know, if you want an apartment or a place to live while you're doing music, you need a job until you start getting paid. You're weighing those challenges. And then when you don't really get the validation, and you should be doing it for validation, but when you're not getting the validation, I've spent like a year on a project, played it for somebody, put my heart and soul in a project, and I get feedback like, man, this is good. But when you do the next album, you should do that one with really good songs. I'm like, this is the best time. I just got my veins open and bled on this album. And they're like, yeah, but you should probably get fatter beats. It's heart-wrenching.
Part of entrepreneurship where you get your teeth kicked in.
Yeah, music's not safe from that too. I think across the board, if you want to build something big, there's definitely an aspect of getting your teeth kicked in. I think the happy medium for me though is I think I'm gonna do a music podcast, which should launch in April. And that's just celebrating artists that are in the position I was in. I don't really have the bandwidth or energy or desire for that matter to really pursue making albums or touring or anything. But I
Mhm.
do want to hear those like stories from the road, the reasons why people fell in love with music. I think like having a music podcast will give me a nice outlet for that. So I should be launching that in April.
Okay. Are you gonna maybe invite guests on and talk to some rock stars, for instance? How do you plan on doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's basically what the structure will be. So it'll be a loosely formatted, maybe half a dozen questions to my guests ahead of time. Give me your earliest memory of music. Give me the moment you felt like you fell in love with music. Give me your best concert. When you leave here today, what are you going to listen to on the ride home? And you'll notice music lovers, you can ask those 4 questions and you'll have 90 minutes of content. Like a real music lover, they can riff about that kind of stuff forever.
How long have you been
Mm.
coming up with this idea?
I birthed it over the holidays, so I wanted to do something, but I also didn't want to just be another podcast guy. I don't want to be recording hour blocks of shooting the shit. And I also really don't want to critique people's art. That was the big thing. I was like, if I do a music podcast, I want the subject matter to be timeless, which means I can't just be talking about current music exclusively because you
Mhm.
won't care about it 3 months later. Kendrick at the Super Bowl will be relevant for another 2 weeks. I want somebody to be able to go back 3 years from now and be like, this episode 2, and be like, oh, it still means something. So I was like, the only way to do that is to really hear authentic stories from people who really lived it and have their unique experience. That's the last undiscovered frontier in music. Everything's been done before. But the last undiscovered stuff is like Chris's story with music. What were the songs that you were listening to when you met the girl? Or what were you listening to on your headphones when you're on mile 19 of the marathon and you're about to throw it in? But then the song just came on. You're like, not yet. Not yet. Those are the stories I want to talk about.
You got the music cleaning business. Sounds like you're
Mhm.
getting back a little bit into music, but not your
Mhm.
main focus. Do you have anything else going on?
I have a grandson. I don't know how relevant that is to your podcast, but having a grandson is pretty cool. He was over here for the football game, and it definitely gives you a new perspective on life from a growth perspective. Just hear me out on this, right? There's something very disarming about when a child looks at you, right? Like you think you're a pretty swell guy, but when you lock eyes with an infant that you're connected to, it kind of messes with you a little inside. You're like, all right, I'm a pretty good guy. And then you're like looking at this child and you're like, I know I'm not a piece of shit, but I really want to be good for this kid. And I hope I'm not a piece of shit. Oh my gosh. I should probably try and be a better person. Like something about disarming with the kids. So recalibrate your values and be like, okay, if I have to explain my actions to this little guy one day, I want to make sure I'm living above board. And I think that was like a big shift for me, just being able to care for this little one. Because I only have one other daughter and she's 23. So I haven't really had to relate to a child for 2 decades.
Mhm. What do you think are some of those core values that have driven you through life and in business?
Good question. I grew up in a religious family, but didn't lean hard into it. But the general concepts of just integrity and honesty, the biggest takeaway from all of it, if all you did was a good job and kept your word, you're better than 90% of businesses. If you attempt to do a good job and you say, no matter what I promise to do, obviously things can change and you can communicate that they've changed or circumstances happen. But the biggest thing I always want to be remembered for is just whatever he said he was going to do, he did it. And I think that can be your biggest value. Because think about the box you put yourself in if that's your main focus, right? You have to be honest. You're very careful about what you promise, right? You're very clear about your offer. You have a reputation of delivering, right? And then you take that value and distribute it across all the other aspects of your life. My closest friends, some are funny, some are a little nuts, some are a little stern, but everyone like within my circle, you can take their word to the bank. If they say they're going to do something, they'll do it. The people I respect, like the people I respect the most, when they say they're going to do something, it's like they deliver. One of my favorite quotes was I was actually when I was really young, I had a mentor and it was like an MLM thing I was doing. Some of the speakers were actually like really good. I learned a lot. It was good mentorship. I don't want to bash it or anything. But one of my mentors would give me something to do. And I'd be like, hey, Julian, can you make sure you do A, B, and C real fast? And I need it done by the 7th. I'm like, yeah, I got you. And what he would say is, okay, Now, can I forget about it? And I always love that. It's one thing to be like, yeah, I'm going to do it, but it's okay. I'm entrusting you with this. Can I just assume it's going to be done? And that was the standard. And that always stuck with me. I was probably 20 years old at the time. And that always stuck with me, you know?
Is that something that you try to infuse into your business? Because that sounds like a very strong trait, a strong leadership style to have.
Yeah. Certainly. I think the goal is to not, like, a really good leader will have people do what you tell them to do. A great leader will be able to duplicate themselves within the people in their charge. I think Simon Sinek talks about it.
Yeah, Sinek.
Yeah. Yeah, he talks about that a lot. It's not that hard to get to. You have reinforcement. So people will do what you say to do. They want to get paid at the end of the week. But those really good leaders can walk away from a company and it'll still run in their absence because their people, they've duplicated themselves within their people. So when you say, okay, this is what we need done by the 27th, it's done. I got the right people.
Learning to play to everyone's strengths and put the pieces in the right places, because you might have someone who's in a sales position, for instance, and maybe you find that they're actually better at marketing.
Right.
But it's all about not just looking at that person and going, hey, you're bad in this. What can we do to fix you in this? But opening it up to find out what they're actually good at.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's certainly important. Catering to each other's strengths. It's like the Stephen Pressfield thing where you're refining the best innate qualities. Like you might need a manager, you might need a technician. And if you're trying to turn a technician into a manager, you may fare a lot better by finding somebody already that has some of those manager qualities, and refining them might be easier instead of trying to put a square peg into a circle hole. That's a good point.
Have you ever found a time where you might be lacking motivation?
Yeah, it's if you're waiting to feel motivated, I think you're in the wrong sport. I think the people that are most effective, I think their actions and behavior have just been relegated to routine. They don't do it because they feel like it. It's we do it because it has to be done. Do I lack motivation? Yes, but am I motivated sometimes? Yeah, I get excited to do things and start new projects. But if my actions are dictated by motivation, forget it. That's a losing equation. I think how did I say it? You almost want to relegate the routine to instinct so motivation becomes a non-factor, right? I use it as like a quarterback, for instance. An NFL quarterback's not thinking, all right, fingers on the laces, take my hips this way, left foot forward, throw the spiral, right? Those habits have already been relegated to a reflex. He's not thinking about that. You're thinking about defenses, coverages, maybe the next down, right? Because all these basic things are already, you just do them, right? You don't think about them, you just do them, right? So you can do that with hard things too, right? Like this part of the business stinks and making phone calls sucks and having to go to the accounting meeting sucks. And I don't want to, like, all those things that you're not motivated for, once they get relegated to just like routine, this is what I do on Tuesday. And I have accounts in Europe. So it means I have to make calls at 6 a.m. So they're 6 hours, whatever. And I don't feel like doing it. But once it gets relegated, now it's just automatic. And now you're thinking beyond like the ag, because now it's just been relegated to habit. And now motivation is just not a factor. Are you excited? Sure. Do you have headaches? Yeah. Like you're not immune to not feeling like it. I think the less motivator is a factor, the more effective you are as leader, business owner, entrepreneur, etc.
Are there any routines that you have that get you in that state of, I'm going to go out here and just do it regardless of if I feel like it or not?
Yeah, I think I got to a place where I know myself. I know when I do my best work. When it comes to doing deep work or anything that requires a lot of really intense thought, I have that sweet spot between, say, 9:30 a.m. and noon. At 2.5 hours between 9:30 and noon, I'm pretty dangerous. And then after that first meal at 12:30, productivity starts to dip a little bit. So you save those kind of tasks for something's really important. I try to start early. I'd like to say that I'm part of the 5 a.m. club, but I got away from it as of late, just for necessity. But for instance, I know that when I start my show, it is going to require a certain degree of writing, calling guests and everything. And I still have a job. So those activities are going to have to get relegated to deep work in the morning, probably when it comes to time of writing and creating, doing interviews at 8 p.m.
So when you're preparing for that, how important do you think that work-life balance is?
Not as important as you think. Depending on how much you believe into what you're doing, I think that you trade one for the other, right? I think that what sets you apart is being able to sacrifice. Now, this is me, right? I would never tell anybody to spend less time with their kids or wife or whatever. But I think that if you can sacrifice that for a little bit of season and be exhausted or antisocial, like people talk about disappearing into the work all the time. I think that people that win do that, right? And they pay that price. Say my show is wildly successful 8 years from now, but to get that, I needed to spend 18 months really laying the framework for that. During that 18 months, my family give me a hard time about going to dinner and missing holidays and stuff. Like, sure. But 3, 4 years from now, I know no one will remember the dinner you missed. They'll be like, wow, what you built was incredible.
P-
I think one gives way to the other.
yeah, people see the peak,
Mhm.
but they don't see the valley that you had to crawl through.
Yeah. Focus on the view, not the climb. Yeah.
Which is interesting. I was listening to a podcast the other day with Chris Williamson and Alex
Mhm.
Hormozy, and they were talking about the view and the
Mhm.
whole work-life balance.
Mhm.
And it was that as you keep climbing, the view really never stops, but you can stop and enjoy it anytime you want.
Brilliant.
I do think at first I definitely felt like I was slogging through this, and it was
Mhm.
very hard to get a lot of momentum going. And sometimes I'm even still, why do I keep doing this? But at the same time, I'm like, you just have to keep pushing through.
Yeah.
And then one day you're going to be that overnight success.
Right. What every overnight success story is what 10, 15 years in the making, I think is the saying. If you don't mind me asking, you're sitting here, I think this would be episode like single digits. I'm not exactly sure which number, but what do you focus on? Like, what gets you to the next interview to like press play and be like, all right, I got another one coming up? Because I know your energy doesn't waver from episode to episode. You seem generally engaged, super inquisitive, like authentically curious. If you don't mind me asking, what are you focusing on that keeps you coming back?
This year, I really decided to go heavy into social media marketing. Alex Hormozy lives rent free in my head. One of the things that he's talking about is the core four. And so there's pretty much the core four ways that you can market. And so the avenue that I wanted to take was social media, which was very different for me because prior to this, I was not on socials at all. So if you would have told me 2 years ago I would be doing a podcast, I would have probably laughed in your face.
Hmm.
And so this year, when it came time to sit down and do this, I started doing it a little bit. But at the same time, I realized that the videos that I was putting out, they just weren't me. And so having the podcast is a way for me to sit down and actually connect with someone on a natural level and not feel like I'm sitting here scripted the whole time. And so I think that I found a lot more energy finding another way to produce content.
If you could break it up into a ratio, how much is fun? How much feels like work?
That's a good question.
Depending on how good the guest is.
It's not just that. When I sit down to edit a podcast episode, I'm a lot happier than if I sit down to edit the scripted content that I've done. For instance, when I decided to get on every platform this year, I took all my content that was on Instagram and started working through it to repurpose it, which was a large load. It was probably not 97 videos.
Wow, okay.
And I had never even attempted that much work in the editing space. And going through that, I was very frustrated at first because I was learning something new. And you can't be expected to say, I'm going to go learn Spanish. And I've read this one Spanish book and now I'm going to speak fluently. That's just not how it works. You got to put in the time, you got to put in the reps, you got to put in the effort. And now it's at the point where it's almost like a game. It's okay, I could sit here and get frustrated, but I can figure this out and get to the next level. And the little small victories every time I'm able to refine my process just a little bit or just find that little switch that makes things a little bit easier.
And it reminds me of, are you a basketball guy? You watch hoops at all?
Nope.
So just to give you a little bit of background. So when Denver won, you know who Nikola Jokic is? Like won
Nope.
like 2 MVPs, 7-footer, does everything.
I mean, nothing about sports.
Like great basketball player, awful at the podium, like one word answers, Serbian guy, heavy accent, right? And they were like, and he just won the MVP in the finals. He's the guy. And he was like, so what do you attribute to success? I forget how they worded the question. And he just like plain as day, like not even smiling. He's like, you have to be willing to be bad, and then you have to get good, and then you have to fail while you're good, and that's how you figure it out. And I'm just like simplest, like Fisher Price But that's the formula. A lot of people aren't willing to be bad. Like you think, but oh, it's just hard work, man. You got to get your reps in and get. A lot of people aren't willing to just be bad while they're learning.
That
And
is actually one of the quotes I have up on my wall, something
mm,
along the lines of people ask you how you find your passion,
mm,
and you started when you sucked,
yeah,
you didn't quit, and you just
yeah,
kept doing it, and then you got good and you started to like it, and
right.
then it became your passion.
Mm,
But the whole point is, even if it sucks, you just have to keep going, because you're going to
mm,
stop what you're doing now and go, ooh, that's shiny, that might work for me, and then you're going to
mm,
hop in there. But guess what, you're now learning something new, and
right.
so you're probably going to suck.
Yeah. Is there anything that you were naturally good at when you were younger that you just took to when you were like elementary age?
Say I've generally always been like a more athletic person.
Mm,
I would say in terms of education, it's
mm,
always been reading. I'm very good at writing, probably better than I give myself credit for. Those are probably my strong suits.
interesting. Do you now? Did you say you're not into sports? Is it you just don't like watching sports, or did you play, or you just once you got older, you're just like, I think we'll do real estate instead?
um, I played a little bit of sports. I just didn't really stick to it,
Mm,
which is funny because I was taking double PE classes. Uh,
mm.
so coaches were constantly seeing me and being like, "Hey, do you want to come play?" And I'm like, "No, I'm good."
Yeah, I'm cool. Yes. Yeah,
um, but it
that's
was
so
just
funny.
never that thing that was really just, "Ooh, I want to go in this direction." And real estate really wasn't either. A couple years ago, I realized that I was actually living the life that I asked for, that I was living the
Mm,
life that I dreamed of,
hmm.
and it wasn't what I wanted.
Wow. I don't want to get into your personal stuff too much, man, but if you don't mind, can you elaborate a little bit when you say the life that you dreamed of?
When I got out of high school and I went straight into the military, I did 3 years in the Army, and during that time, of course, I was 18, 19. I had the world figured out. I knew everything.
Yes, as do most teenagers.
And I sat down and I was like, "Okay, at the end of the day, I want a life where I can hang out with my friends, and if I've got enough money for a beer and I can sit down and play some video games, like, that's enough for me."
Cool.
And a couple years ago, I was literally in that position, and I was sitting there and I like sitting on the couch playing video
Mhm,
games with some alcohol, and
mhm,
I was like, "Wow, I'm living the life I want." And is this it? Is this
mhm,
just me till the end of time? Is there nothing else? And it just didn't sit right. And that's when I started branching out and trying to figure out what I was going to do, because I was very comfortable at my W-2. It was probably the reason I've been there for so long.
mhm.
But at the same time, I knew I needed to find something else to get out and it just expands somehow.
Mm.
And then I stumbled into real estate when I had a bad landlord.
All right, that's interesting. Yeah, I was like the guy that loved sports, awful at sports. Like I have the literal worst genetics for sports. Like as much as I wanted to play, and then I think I,
Mhm,
I took to music more naturally. Like my family is all artists, so it made sense that I could like naturally just write songs. The
mhm.
problem is that I was always surrounded by superior talent. Ever since I was in elementary, I tried to draw comic books. My best friend was like an amazing artist. I'm like, my stuff doesn't look like that. And then I start getting into music, and everybody goes to all like the cute girls shows or like the rock stars that are already established. Then you get into business, and it's like everybody's already like way more successful. But I think that there's something to be said about just allowing yourself to be bad. And if you can get past like the judgment, which nobody's really judging me, nobody cares enough about you to judge you. It's all up here. So if you can like met the clumsiness of figuring it out, um, you'd be surprised. Yeah.
Oddly enough, I think that's a pretty hard concept to grasp, even for myself, because in a way, for instance, I used to take it very simply. And I was like, okay, if you dyed your hair green, like bright green or something,
Mm,
if you went to somewhere that no one is familiar with, they're going to look at you and they're going to think, okay, green hair, that's normal for him.
right.
That's it's just that little aspect that's, if you just do what you want to do and present yourself how you wanted to present yourself, not a lot of people are actually going to care in the grand scheme of things.
Spot on. I think that's why you get so much more support from strangers than you do from the people in your circle. Have you noticed that at all? Like when I try to present any kind of like work, art, whether it's business, whether it's something creative, it's always, oh, that's Jules's new thing. You notice how you like you'll never be a star in front of your mom because she'll only ever see you as a boy. But like a stranger can be like, wow, you have a really incredible business. Meanwhile, you just printed business cards and got the t-shirts made like a week ago. And they're like, wow, this is a really good business. You guys do great work. I'll recommend you to everybody. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I just did my aunt's place and she's trying to beat me up on price and give me a hard time. I think that's why though, because you almost get to present a new perspective to a stranger beyond what you have on your site and your social media and stuff. Like you actually get to present yourself in that new light.
Yeah, they haven't,
Yeah.
been able to form that opinion of you already. And so
Right.
it's just like this blank slate, especially getting into entrepreneurship. Once you start changing and doing different things, your friend group is like, whoa, what is this? I'm not really comfortable with this. Breaking the habit of being yourself. They talk
Mhm.
about the people around you are freaked out by change because
Mhm.
they're also using you to reaffirm their own identities. And so now that your identity is shifting, it's, whoa, I'm not okay with this. I want the other part of you back. What is going on here? Something's not right.
Right. Right. Yeah, and relationships inherently, relationships are selfish, right? We gravitate towards people we get some degree of benefit from. Obviously, your closer friends, you make sacrifices for, you're willing to invest more inconvenience. But for the most part, most relationships at a surfacey level are selfish, right? You're gaining things, you benefit each other. One hand kind of washes the other. And one of the biggest benefits of a relationship is that validation. Like we're
Mhm.
both the same kind of damage, we're both the same kind of humor, we're both the same kind of we're both the same status. We pay the same in taxes. We drink at the same bars and eat at the same restaurants. And that
Mhm.
shift is it does really rattle somebody's core when they see you starting to elevate like this. You're like, you mean we're not the same? Wait, we're not the same anymore? What's happening now?
It's a different experience getting into entrepreneurship. Even just dabbling in it, it will teach you some things. One of those just being not quitting and learning to rely on yourself.
Right.
There's really a level of commitment that you have to your goals, whether it's earning $1 million or just
Mhm.
finding that best version of yourself. There's
Right.
got to be that existential why that keeps you going. Even if you don't know what it is, I think internally, everybody knows what their why is. They
Right.
might not just be ready to figure it out.
Do you think the why shifts? And if it does shift, do you think it's healthy or do you think it's counterproductive? Should your why not shift? What do you think?
I think it depends on the person. Some people could honestly be doing it for their family's sake,
Mhm.
but I think you could also have multiple. And as you grow and as you scale and your business becomes bigger, then this might still be your why, but now
Mhm.
you have this level and then this level, and things just continue to grow. So I think your why is probably going to shift multiple times.
Yeah.
You just have to be able to keep it in focus and find that one real guiding star to keep you on track.
I agree with that. I can get behind that. Good.
If you could spend a day shadowing anybody, who would that be?
Excellent question. I would say Pharrell Williams. Are you familiar with him?
I am not.
All right. So Pharrell Williams he's the producer on no less than a dozen of your favorite songs. He started out, he was in the Neptunes, started out doing like hip hop tracks. He has whole albums with Justin Timberlake. I'm a bunch of people, it's escaping me now, but for Jay-Z, a bunch of songs with Jay-Z. But the way he moves, like between music, between fashion, between just his business, the way he presents himself publicly, it's okay. If you want to blend art and business, like a lot of people do it, the way he does it is like, I just love how that looks. He's about my age, probably a little
Mhm.
bit older, like a year or two older. Always calm, still like crazy talented. He'll put on a verse on like somebody's song and it'll be like the standout. I was like, I forgot he could rap. He did the soundtrack to Despicable Me. Like he did like big songs on that one there. Yeah, probably him.
Very nice.
What about you?
I really don't know.
I think it would be like an Alex or like a Chris Williamson just because of the way like you reference them. But like Alex has so much content out, you feel like you already are shadowing.
Like, you can choose any mentor you want just by opening
Mhm.
up a book or tuning
Right.
into their podcast and just
Mhm.
following them.
Mhm.
I could say Alex, Chris Williamson, David Goggins. I
Mhm.
think I really like them just because they are very
Mhm.
authentic people.
Right.
I think more than anything, past the mindset, past the wisdom that they're able to provide, I think they're just very authentic people, and that's why I gravitate towards them.
Yeah. It makes sense. I see like the person in them, like it's not just all persona. Like they seem like to the core good guys, but also like flawed people, which makes them just more human and are very open about like their challenges and stuff.
At the end of the day, what is the legacy that you're trying to leave behind?
If I had to do it now, if I had to make that decision now or make that call now, I would want if so all right. So the aliens come down 1,000 years from now and they have to tell the story of 2025 or tell the story of Abington and this breadth of time between say like 2000 and 2040, which is like when I lived. I want them to be able to look in a time capsule and be like, okay, um, he did some cool artwork, but the way he connected with people was the blueprint of how you're supposed to connect with people. Like my dad, humble guy, not the wealthiest guy, obviously. I mean, worked his whole life. But I watched my dad walk into a room. Some strangers, some people know him. And when I tell you an hour of him being in the room, like he's touched every life in the room. Don't know how he does it. Everybody in the room just feels like they knew him. And it's okay. If you want to learn anything, that's how you do the people thing. That's how you make people feel seen. That's how you make people feel loved, appreciated. I'd like to think I have a touch of that, but by the time like I leave the planet, I want there to be like proof that he like that's how you take care of your bros. That's how you look after your parents. That's the way you give wisdom to young people without feeling like you're preaching at them. Like he got the people. He made a few bucks, but he got the people thing.
It sounds like he was a very
So
good communicator, able to understand people at a very granular level,
Right.
not just the surface level that people might be portraying on the outside.
Yeah. I think it's the unspoken dialogue. You can give off energy that's just cold and you can be uninviting. You like we were talking about before. Like you can walk into the same group of people and the way you say hello or the way you stand and whether or not you're smiling, either invite people in or just put up a wall. And it's the non-spoken, it's like the energy. You walk in a room and say anything. And you just watch people just gravitate to magnetism.
How tough do you think it is to really embody that persona or
Mhm.
be able to control that energy that you're talking about?
It's one of the rare things. I think either you have it or you don't. You can manufacture it for the sake of some one-off meetings here and there. But to live that, I don't know, man. I think you just have to have it. Like I've seen people that have it, right? There's certain leaders where you're like, he was a great speaker. And then they get off stage and you're like, oh, I want to go over there. Maybe he'll sign my book and I have some questions. And you just feel so safe walking up to them and talking to them. And then there's other people you're just like, oh, he doesn't even want to be bothered. Some people just have it. I don't think you get that by reps. I think you're just like a warm, loving person. And yes, you can be nice because it's good to be nice, but I think you have to have it.
No turning it around, Scrooge McDuck style.
Yeah. If three ghosts come to visit you and show you what your life would be like if you stop being an asshole, then yeah, maybe things change you. I mean, like you probably weren't the same person when you got out of the military as you were when you went in. Whether it made you more understanding. You hear about these guys that go on tour, they come back traumatized and cold, and some of them come back really appreciative. Ever hear Marcus Luttrell get interviewed? He's so warm and grateful and has this spirit of gratitude. Meanwhile, the guy lost his buddies and like firefight in Afghanistan. I don't think I'd be warm too, but I'd probably be pretty bitter and angry and not really want to tell stories and help people, you know?
I think it's really going to be that determining factor.
Right.
I think we all have that choice to, with any situation, to either live in the pain or find that one thing that's actually good about the situation.
Right.
There's a story about a boy who his dad bought him a horse and everybody thinks it's great. And there's an old man and he's like, we'll see. And then the boy breaks his leg on the horse and everyone's, wow, that sucks. And the old man's like, we'll see. The army comes because there's a war. The boy can't go because his leg's broken. Everyone's, oh, that's great. The old man is, we'll see. And so it's, if you just keep extending the time horizon, some of these things that you might be seeing as bad now could actually be good. And it's all
Right.
about the perspective and the choice that we make to how we're going to look at these items.
Right. Like Tony Robbins touches on that when he talks about gratitude. You can't be angry and grateful at the same time. You can't be
Right.
fearful and grateful at the same time. So you operate from a position of, yes, we have lofty goals and yes, we have challenges, but If you start from a place of gratitude, I think that's how you harness that spirit of warmth, and it makes you a little bit more approachable, which is how you have that kind of glowing energy where people want to work with you and do business with you and be around you. You just want to be somebody that people want to be around.
Yeah, not somebody who's been living in that angry state for so long.
Right.
And one of the things that I heard Tony say was when you're focusing on one of those emotions, you're choosing to not focus on all the other ones. And so when you're, angry about something, you're choosing to push out all the other emotions that could possibly make you happy. And so it's a choice. Like you can choose to take a breath, do whatever you need to do to bring those other emotions back in and change your state.
Mm, yes. Do you think now how much of that is control and how much of that is not controllable? I think easier said than done. I'm sad. I didn't choose to be sad. I'm just sad, dude. I'm hurt. My feelings are hurt. I'm not really choosing to be sad, but I am sad nonetheless. You want me to choose to be grateful and happy? Like how it's hard, right? Like how much of
It's
that is
hard.
do you think how much of that is control? How much of that is choice? How much of that is maybe I'm just sad.
I think of a lot of it is you just, for one, you got to be very self-aware. You got to be willing
Mhm.
to dig deep and do some introspection on, okay, if I am sad, what is making me feel this way in this moment? And maybe if you can pinpoint it, then you can kind of reason with it. One of the exercises that Tony did that really got to me was essentially it's belief busting. And so if you have this belief that's on a three-legged table,
Okay.
and each one of those legs is a lie that you're telling yourself or a truth that you're telling yourself to hold that belief in place. And so, of
Mm,
course, if it's a negative belief, now you have three legs that you need to disprove. And generally, once you write something down and you put it on paper and it's in front of you, you'll be able to actually reason it away and go, okay, is this true beyond a shadow of a doubt? Like, this is
mm.
absolutely 100% true. If it's not, then you can rewrite it.
Yeah.
Well, this is definitely a great conversation. Julian, where can people go to find out more about what you're working on and connect with you?
For now, I'm using my government name on everything, so it should be pretty easy. Just Julian Jones. Find me on Instagram, Facebook, Threads. When the podcast does launch, it'll just be called Loves Music, like underscore Loves Music. But yeah, just come find me. I love to connect with you. I answer back everything. If you reach out to me, you'll get responses. I don't have anybody like managing my socials or anything. Love to hear from you. Love to connect. If you're into music, personal growth, if you're a fan of Chris Dickerson, reach out. Yeah, man. And Chris, man, I want to thank you personally, man. I think that what you're doing is huge. It's important. I don't think you realize how good you already are at this thing. And if you just don't stop, man, I think what you're doing is awesome and it's only going to get better. May geography keep us apart, man. May technology keep us together.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Zero Growth, talking about a lot of mindset shifts tonight. If you got value from this episode, subscribe, share it with a friend, helps more people find the channel. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, anywhere you're listening. Subscribe, share it. And if you want to connect with Julian, check the show notes. All the links will be in the description. Until next time, keep growing.